Hey everybody, Marcus here. After I made my video describing how one can get into software development, I was flooded with a great deal of questions as to how individuals can proceed with their own career paths. Though I did answer individual questions, I wanted to put together a video for those who have already been engaged in self-study and could use some guidance on how to get that first job. Now, if you follow the general roadmap I outlined in the first video, you will inevitably get to the stage where you are ready to secure this first job. As with most roles, you are stuck with the chicken and the egg conundrum. In order to get the job, you need experience. And in order to get experience, you need to get the job. Though it is possible to fabricate some experience on your resume, I believe this is not really necessary, and I will demonstrate how you can structure your junior developer resume to make you stand out. First and foremost, let us discuss the purpose of a resume. Now, a resume is not intended to land you a job. A resume is strictly intended to spike enough interest in the hiring manager so that you get an interview. Now, this is important. This is an important idea to keep in mind because it's basically a game of human psychology. What you do not want to do is say too little on your resume to be excluded, or say too much to have you excluded either. Basically, you want to say the minimum required and let the imagination of the hiring manager fill in the blanks. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of writing the resume, let us first talk about cover letters. Now, I never write cover letters personally because I feel they are a waste of time for both myself and for the hiring manager. Now, the unspoken understanding between candidate and hiring manager is that the candidate is applying because, well, they want a job pretty much anywhere, as they need to earn money and pay the rent. Now, this is an obvious, transparent, and primary motivator that does not need to be dressed up in false pretense. However, there is one exception to this rule that I do agree with. The exception is if you have a specific reason to desire employment at the company you are applying for. Now, this reason cannot be so banal as the office of the potential employer is close to your house. I mean, though this is a valid reason to prefer one organization over another, it carries no swaying power as far as the hiring manager is concerned. I mean, he does not care how employment at his company will convenience you. No, the sort of reason I am suggesting is one of passion, namely, that you have a passion to work for this specific company because of who they are, what they do, their position as a market leader, or their consciousness of being a good corporate citizen. Now, this would mean that the only companies where it may be worthwhile to compose a cover letter would be large development houses who have a clear history that is transparent to the public. For example, let us assume you see an opening at Facebook and want to apply with them. You can opt to simply send your resume in and will have as good a chance of getting an interview as anyone else who simply sent their resume in. However, you can distinguish yourself through a cover letter. Now, what would you put into such a cover letter? Well, you would put a combination of three things. Firstly, you would pronounce your unconditional love for the organization with a focus on pointing out how much good Facebook has brought into the world. In essence, you are appealing to a moral position in which you paint Facebook, the website, as well as the company, as some sort of righteous force for good. The second thing you need to do is highlight that you have been preparing your own education strategy specifically to apply to Facebook, and that you envision yourself staying with the company for the long term. Thirdly, you need to scatter throughout your cover letter not so obvious insights about the company. What you do is you go to the Facebook corporate site and find out if they donate to charities or run bursary programs for the arts, or if Facebook offers special programs or scholarships. Basically, you need to make the hiring manager aware that you are aware of all dimensions of the company's activities. Now, this is crucial because this awareness lends weight to your claims to unconditional love for the organization. Praise the company without exaggeration and give the impression that you have truly put thought and effort into formulating your decision to join this organization. Give them an idea of some ideal position you would wish to work your way towards, where you feel you would best promote the company's mission statement. For example, as far as Facebook is concerned, you might make a claim that you wish to work your way up to an evangelist position and, spread the gospel of Zuckerberg to the non-believers and so on. By the way, The role of evangelist is an actual role in Facebook. It is a position that is a sort of technical sales position where you, as a developer, help promote the advantages of integrating with the platform, while at the same time acting as a technical guide on how this is done. Now, given all this, we can clearly see why a cover letter would not be appropriate for all companies. If you are applying to Tom's Software and Guns, it would hardly make any sense to proclaim some undying desire to work for them. In fact, such claims to a small mom and pop shop would be somewhat scary for the hiring manager. So, with all this said, if you are applying to large organizations like Facebook, Microsoft, Google, LinkedIn, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Twitter, and so on, then it might be worthwhile to give your junior developer pitch that extra punch with a cover letter. In all other cases, well, it's a waste of time. Remember, the cover letter should be about your relationship to the organization and not about you. The objective of a cover letter is simply to indicate that you are serious about the company in addition to needing a job to pay the rent. Okay, now that we have covered the role and content of a cover letter, let us look towards the resume itself. As a junior developer, we will need to deal with the reality that we will have little to offer in terms of past software experience. However, the structure of your resume will not really look any different to the structure of a senior developer's resume. As such, let us first define the structure of a resume and then discuss in details the objectives of every section. A typical software developer resume will contain the following sections in order of priority: contact details, introduction, skill set/keywords, job history, then anything else at the end. Let us explore each of these sections in detail. First, we have the contact details. Clearly, you should have your home address, email address, and phone number in those details, but also your name. Now, let us discuss how you put forward your name. It may seem obvious, well, that you simply write your name and get on with it, but I believe there's a little bit more nuance to it. Now, we have become a fairly globalized industry, so diversity of names is quite common, but this does not negate the fact that some names are very difficult to pronounce and other names can carry certain connotations with them. Now, remember what we said earlier. We are playing a psychological game with the hiring manager. We need to minimize on the potential unconscious reasons a hiring manager may dismiss you or put you in the maybe pile. Your name has the potential to trigger these unconscious biases. Now, I have worked with various people of all sorts of crazy names, and what I have found, especially with Asians, is that they adopt a Western alias to compensate for the potential unpronounceability of their names. Personally, I have had to do the same thing, as my legal name is one of those Polish names that are virtually illegible to non-Polish. In fact, when people ask me to spell my name, I usually say something like, yeah, I know it's kind of crazy. You spell it ABC, pound star, carry the one. Just recall some of Sargon of Akkad's videos, where he is reading news articles with Polish names. I mean, there was one video that I specifically recall where he's reading it out and saying something like, Maciej Karszyszczał, fuck you, Poland. And that's the sentiment we want to avoid. If you have a very unusual name by English standards, and have found your experience is to consistently correct people when they first try to say it, you should think about picking an English-friendly alias. This may sound mean, but trust me, I've seen this do wonders for some of my friends. Of course, this only applies to your first name and not your last name. You can clarify your proper legal name to your employer after you have received and accepted a job offer. Okay, that covers unusual names. Now, let us move on to names that may trigger other biases. If your name is Muhammad, you may trigger certain ideas in the mind of the hiring manager. Muhammad, Muslim, terrorism. Now, this is not to suggest that the hiring manager will discriminate on this, but due to the associations the human mind can draw, and given the political landscape, there's no point in gambling on potentially invoking the thoughts of terrorism into the mind of the hiring manager when applying for a job. I mean, the same can be said for names like Adolf, Chastity, or Anders. I mean, the point is, at the resume stage, a hiring manager can reject you for absolutely any reason with impunity, and you will never be given a reason, so it is best to cover your bases. I have a very good friend named Mohammed. I mean, he is an atheist and his life, mannerisms, and values are purely Western. But he started seeing better results when he started going by Mo as opposed to Muhammad. Invocation of the image of Mo Sislak from The Simpsons clearly is superior to the alternative. Remember, my goal in this video is not to judge why things are the way they are, but to help you get an interview. Okay, now that we have covered off the presentation of your name, there's one other article of information that you can include in your contact section that might help you. Though the hiring manager can infer your sex from your name, he will not be able to infer your age very accurately, though he can get an estimate based on your job history. Now, I know that it is against the law to discriminate against age, but again, here we are working with unconscious biases sometimes, and age may in fact be included in the decision of the hiring manager. Once again, at the resume stage, the hiring manager can discriminate with impunity. Though the hiring company cannot legally ask for your age, well, in some countries at least, there's nothing stopping you from volunteering your age. Now, I have done this myself to good effect. Now, if you are younger than 20, a certain impression may take hold in the mind of the hiring manager as to your maturity, your work ethic, experience, and so on. If you are under 20, it may be wise to keep your age out of the spotlight, as it won't really act in your favor. This does not mean it will act against you, but it'll definitely not act in your favor. However, if you are between 20 and 35, then putting your date of birth in the contact section will give the hiring manager a number that is usually expected for a developer. You see, there's a certain stereotype for what a developer looks like, in the same way that there's a stereotype for what a manager or politician looks like. For a manager or politician, you typically imagine an older man in a suit who is clean shaven and has short hair. Well, for a developer, you imagine someone in the age range of 20 to 35. When a man starts pushing beyond 35, questions may enter the hiring manager's mind, such as why the candidate is not a manager themselves already, and so on. If you are within the specified age range and advertise your birth date, you'll fulfill the stereotype. If you are above 35, then it is again best to avoid drawing attention to your age. Again, this is just subtle psychological warfare and should not be taken as strongly correlated to the success of your resume. As you will be crafting your resume as a junior developer, your age will factor into the questions a hiring manager will ask. For example, if you are 40 and applying for a junior developer role, you will inevitably be asked why you are retraining. This question is only natural, but if you can avoid bringing it up in the mind of the hiring manager at the resume stage, a stage where an answer cannot be immediately given in any depth, then you are better off deferring it to the interview stage. Now, let us move on to the introduction section of your resume. The introduction section should be no longer than a paragraph and should be written in a generic fashion. Though you can feel free to slightly tweak this section based on the specific nature of the role you're applying for, as in a web developer versus a back-end developer, it is not usually necessary if written properly. Now, this section should really be treated as an executive summary about your development background, and as a junior developer, this is going to be tough, as, well, you have no such background. So, this is what you do. Well, before you start applying for jobs, you need to build 3 small websites. The top-level domain of the website should be your name, if possible, and each site should be a subdomain of the top-level domain. Now, each site should clearly demonstrate a competency. One site should demonstrate your ability to do simple login-based activity, like an e-commerce site where you need to register, log in, add stuff to a shopping cart, and then go through a simulated checkout process with an email notification sent in the end of the simulated experience. This will demonstrate all sorts of competencies that are relevant to the real world. The second website you need to develop is a single-screen responsive site that scales according to the device being used. This will demonstrate your awareness and ability to deal with different devices. The last site should be your pimped out, self-hosted WordPress blog that you have actually written various blog entries for. These entries should be short and talk about small nuggets of technical wisdom you learned. Now, what is critical though is that your blog looks like it is active. This means that a hiring manager browsing your site should see several months worth of short articles you have written, with the last post preferably being from the same week you applied for the job. A 3-month history with a 1 post per week rate means 12 posts in total, and that's good enough. Now, the reason I am describing these 3 websites as part of the introduction section of your resume is because you will be linking to these websites directly from your introduction section. Now, I have received a few resumes that use this approach, and I have used it myself in the past. When I received a resume with links in the introduction, the first thing I would do was go to those links and play around with the sites. I would load up Firebug and see what sort of JavaScript libraries were used, as well as what the author's front-end code looked like. In a short 5 minutes of doing this, I learned a great deal about the candidate. However, what I have never seen is a junior who has taken this approach. If I saw such 3 sites set up by a junior, I would be very impressed based on a few criteria, namely initiative, passion, and work ethic. This is what you need to do to stand out. Also, these sites can be developed as you learn software development itself, so they do not need to be specifically created for the purpose of your resume. However, if you do this, make sure these sites work across the 3 main browsers of Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Chrome, as you cannot assume what browser will be used by the hiring manager. Now, there are still a few more links you can pack into your introduction that will help you stand out. You should link to 2 or 3 blogs that you follow, of prominent .NET bloggers such as Scott Hanselman, Scott Guthrie, or the Daily WTF, or any other relevant blog. By making the hiring manager aware that you are aware of these bloggers, this states that you are conscious of the .NET community. In addition to this, try and publish an article or 2 on Stack Overflow and link to those. Get involved in 1 or 2 small open source projects on GitHub and link to those as well. All of these simple things make you look like a serious developer, even though you have yet to hold a single professional job. Now, those 3 websites we just talked about will not only act as a showcase of your work, but will serve as evidence for what you put in the next section of your resume. The section after your introduction will be your skill set/keyword section. Now, this section serves 2 purposes. Firstly, it is a software-friendly section that will allow a resume parser to immediately and efficiently find your technological competencies. Recruitment agencies, as well as job sites like Monster, use these keyword parsers to identify relevant candidates. In addition to this section is very friendly to non-technical hiring managers, as well as headhunters who hire based on little else than keywords. Though a developer will be able to infer some of the technologies used based on exploring your sample work and past job experience, a non-technical person will have no idea you know them unless you spoon-feed the information to them. This section should be a simple table in MS Word with 2 columns. The column on the left should designate the relevant category of technologies, while the column on the right should be the specific technologies in this category. One example of a category, say, is operating systems. What operating systems do you know how to use? Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2012 R2, and on and on. Other sections should be programming languages, databases, platforms, front-end, processes, and quality assurance. For each category, list off every technology you have some competence in. This list can grow quite long, quite quickly, but that's only a good thing. The second purpose that this section serves is to clearly show you are a full-stack developer. By showing the breadth of technologies you have learned, a technical hiring manager will be able to infer how you can fit into the organization outside of what it may say on the job advertisement. What should always be kept in mind is that the job advertisement may just be some generic, well-sounding cookie-cutter template that the hiring manager uses over and over as he is too lazy to write one specific for the role he is hiring for. One example of how lazy this can be is when I responded to a senior developer advertisement that turned out to be a director position. This bait and switch has happened 3 times in my career, where the role advertised was very different from the role described in the interview. Next, we move on to the job history section of your resume. As we are aiming this video for the junior developer, I will assume you have zero software development job history. This section, for the most part, will be a copy and paste job from your existing resume. I am of the opinion that it is better to show a long history of employment that is not relevant than no history whatsoever. This means that if you are, say, 30 years old and have worked in sales for 10 years, make sure to include all of this. There's no hiding the fact that you are retraining in this scenario, so you are best off owning it. If you are younger than 20 and are going down the self-taught route, then you should still showcase whatever employment history you have had, as it will show responsibility. As no one would expect anything high profile from a 20-year-old, you should not consider any line cook, bartending, or construction roles as irrelevant. I would much rather hire a 20-year-old junior developer with 2 years experience as a dishwasher than a 20-year-old who has never experienced earning his own money. There will be a distinct attitude difference, such as the candidate's willingness to follow instruction and defer to authority. Also, do not try to change around the roles and responsibilities of any non-software job you had in, some vain attempt to highlight computer use. It won't work and will come across as desperate. Make sure to highlight, in a domain-specific way, responsibility, initiative, and leadership. If you worked in a bar, then highlight the fact you may have been responsible for opening and closing the bar, acted as a shift manager, or dealt with deliveries and so on. Those sorts of activities show accountability, are domain-specific, and don't come across as pandering. If you worked in a bar, make sure that that entry reads like the best damn barman who ever lived. Remember, your software credibility comes from those 3 websites you built and the list of technologies you know. The job history section can now only demonstrate success in your past career, with the implication that you will create similar success in your new career. Your job entries should be in reverse chronological order and contain the name of the role you held and the start and end date. Immediately below this line, you should call out the organization for which you worked and the general geographical location, such as city and country. Following this, there should be around 4 to 5 bullet points, no longer than 2 lines each, describing your responsibilities and achievements, if relevant. The further back in time you go with your job entries, the fewer bullet points are needed. If you are going back more than 5 years, the bullet points become unnecessary, unless you consider them relevant. I have received resumes from men in their late 30s that have been retraining themselves, and their application for the role I was hiring for was their first attempt at a professional software development job. And like I said in my previous video, if you price yourself correctly, between 25 and 35,000, and you operate in the same stack as the hiring company, you will get an interview. One candidate that I was interviewing who was in this position had an enormous edge over all the university graduates who were applying for the same position. Though he never worked in software before, he worked in the same domain as the product we were developing. So for example, if you worked in a bank for 10 years and retrained to work in software, and then applied as a junior developer to a bank, you will already have an edge, as you will understand the industry, know the lingo, and potentially have insights into the competition. And this is exactly what happened with this late 30s junior I was interviewing. I would have never known this if the candidate did not include all his past work history. He got the interview because I knew I could leverage his former career expertise in my team. Outside of this, general job history writing advice, make sure that you keep fonts consistent and that your spelling and grammar are perfect. The last section is the other information section of the resume. Here, you should put down a single line for your highest achieved education level and the institution where it was attained. Again, we must follow the rules about age we set down before. If you are between 20 and 35, you should put down the date you graduated. If not, then omit the date. A single line should be put down that says, references available upon request following your education. As you have no software job history to speak of, no one will ask you for any. In fact, even if you did have a software job history, still no one would ask you for any references. Outside of this, feel free to include anything else that is relevant to software development, such as user groups you may be a member of, certificates you may have attained, and so on. As I said in my previous video, I do not believe certifications are, of much value. If you indeed develop the 3 websites as I outlined earlier, and those websites indeed look good, then that is all the proof a hiring manager could possibly want in order to give you an interview. Now, before I close this video, I want to offer one more tip for waging psychological warfare on the technical hiring manager, namely the use of humor in your resume. Now, for the love of God, do not try to be funny in your resume. However, what I have done before, and I find very effective, is to hide an Easter egg inside my resume that is an in-joke only true software nerds will understand. A non-technical hiring manager will not even notice the joke, but it should make a technical hiring manager laugh. The best place to put this joke is at the very end of your resume. If the hiring manager has actually gotten to the end of your resume, then it is likely you are already being seriously considered for an interview. Sometimes, what really helps to throw them over the edge is a little laugh, a sign of a less serious, playful nature. Now, the joke I typically use is to close my resume with exit 0. Now, this is an old C language command statement that terminates the program with the exit code of 0. The exit code of 0 indicates that the program has terminated without fault. The subtle context is that my resume is now finished, but also that it finished with no problems. Again, working on the subconscious of the reader. There are many other things you can put as the very last line in your CV that can also evoke a laugh, such as all your base are belong to us, or some other old nerd meme that would have been popular when the internet was first beginning. Other things you can do is include expertise in technologies that were clear failures in the past, such as, well, Windows Millennium Edition. Now, as a junior, I would stick to one line at the very end of your resume, but as a senior, you can have more fun with this. And the last piece of advice is to spam your resume to every single job you feel even remotely qualified for. Like in PUA, this is a game of numbers at the end of the day. Hit up every single job site and apply to every role demanding up to 3 years experience. Though you may not have the 3 years, you also do not know how desperate the company may be to get someone in the door. In addition to this, you can never know ahead of time if the required years of experience that are listed are really required or, a nice to have. This strongly depends on the nature of the hiring manager. As such, never self-selectively reject yourself from a job by not applying. If your resume clearly does not fit the bill, you will be dismissed within seconds and your name forgotten within minutes. There's absolutely no cost or risk in applying for a job you are seemingly underqualified for, at least on paper. Of course, do not spam the same company more than once at a time, but spam each of them nonetheless if you are applying direct. In addition to spamming jobs direct, also spam every single recruitment agency you can find. Make sure they know you exist. Also, do not be afraid to spam your resume all over the country. You may need to relocate for the first role, if you're not having any luck locally. But, well, sacrifices must be made if you want to see success. So, I hope you found this video to be useful, and all the best in scoring that interview. Thanks for listening. Go team.